All right, anchors away. We're diving back into Moana's world.
Back by popular demand.
You got it. The original Moana, huge hit, of course.
Definitely a modern classic.
But the reviews you sent in for Moana 2 are... Well, let's just say there's some debate about whether this sequel sets sail in the right direction.
I'm seeing some rough waters ahead, huh?
Maybe a few rogue waves. We've got some praising the visuals, some absolutely slamming the villain, and even a few arguing it should have stayed a series.
Oh, wow. A series-turned-movie situation. Always tricky.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder what happened behind the scenes, right?
It'll be interesting to unravel that one. So what's the consensus? Is Moana 2 worth the voyage, or should we just stay on dry land?
Let's find out. One thing we can all agree on is Moana has definitely grown up since we last saw her. It's not just about, sailing off on another adventure.
No, it sounds like the reviewers are pointing to a real shift in her character. She's not just reacting to the world around her anymore.
Okay, so she's not the same impulsive teenager from the first movie. Got it. But what does that actually look like in Moana 2? How do they show that?
Well, one review highlighted how she initially wants to handle this new quest all on her own, but she learns to rely on her crew. They called it a lovely, thoughtful boost to her character arc.
Makes sense. It's not just personal growth anymore, right? It's about leading her people, making decisions that impact everyone.
Exactly. And that's a heavier weight to carry, for sure. No longer just following the ocean's call.
It really makes you think about the pressures of leadership, right? Like when you're facing a challenge and your instinct is to just power through it alone, but sometimes asking for help, trusting others. That's the real test.
Absolutely. Delegating, collaborating, knowing you don't have to have all the answers yourself.
Maybe Moana's got something to teach us all about leadership and trust.
Couldn't hurt to learn from someone who can talk to the ocean.
Right. Speaking of new companions, we've got a whole new crew joining Moana this time.
Right. New adventure, new faces. Who are we sailing with this time?
Well, there's Moni, who's apparently the ultimate Maui superfan. Then there's Lodo, the brainy canoe maker, and Keel, the grumpy farmer who, well, let's just say I doubt he signed up for this.
Huh. I can already picture the dynamic, the banter, the clashing personalities. The reviewers must have had a field day with these three.
Oh, they did. What stood out about the new crew?
Well, some reviewers loved their quirks, how those played off of each other. They brought humor and a real sense of camaraderie to the journey. But one review pointed out something that kind of makes you think.
Oh, I'm listening. What is it?
Apparently, Moni goes through a pretty traumatic experience, but the film doesn't really explore the emotional fallout.
That's interesting. So, it's glossed over.
This reviewer felt it was a missed opportunity, hinting that maybe a series format would have given that storyline more room to breathe.
I see. It makes you wonder if cramming what was meant to be a series into a movie
led to some compromises.
Exactly. You want those big action sequences, the stunning visuals, but maybe some character depth got lost along the way.
It's a valid point. This review mentioned it could have been better developed in a series format, and there are a few others saying similar things. Several critics seem to be saying that certain elements felt rushed or incomplete, and it sounds like they're pointing to the series-to-movie transition as a possible culprit.
Okay, I'm starting to sense a pattern here. Let's talk about the elephant, or should I say storm god in the room. The villain, Nalo.
Ah, yes, Nalo. It sounds like the reviewers weren't impressed.
Not impressed is putting it mildly. Multiple reviewers called him out for being underwhelming. But the reason why is pretty shocking.
Oh, this should be good. Tell me he's another one of those villains who just monologues from his lair for the whole movie.
Worse. He doesn't even appear on screen until the mid-credits scene.
Wait, are you serious?
I'm dead serious. All this build-up, all this tension, and the big bad villain is basically an afterthought.
So Moana's battling this unseen force for the whole movie. No face-offs, no epic showdowns.
Nope. One reviewer even compared it to fighting a thunderstorm. You see the effects, you feel the power, but there's no tangible villain to grapple with. And remember how visually impactful Maui's actions were in the first film. We saw the consequences of his choices, the destruction, the stakes.
And with Nalo, it's all just talk.
Basically.
Yeah, I can see why the reviewers would have a problem with that lack of a strong antagonist. It definitely takes away from the excitement, the drama.
It's like the story's missing that essential ingredient, that face to truly root against.
Right.
But hey, maybe they're setting him up for a bigger role in Moana 3.
Perhaps. But is that a good enough excuse for sidelining him in this film? It's something to think about. It's almost like they're saying, just wait for the next movie, it'll be better then.
Right.
But shouldn't this film stand on its own?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that should stand on their own, Let's talk music.
Yes. The soundtrack.
Hmm?
Always a crucial element, especially for a Disney film.
Especially one following in Moana's footsteps.
Exactly.
New movie, new songwriters. Which means, of course, everyone's comparing it to Lin-Manuel Miranda's work on the original. Big shoes to fill.
It's a tough act to follow, that's for sure.
So did they manage? Did the new songs reach those same heights?
From what I'm gathering from these reviews, maybe not.
Ooh, that's got to sting for the new composers. What are the reviewers saying exactly? Are the songs just not catchy?
One review actually called them cheap imitation Lin-Manuel.
Ouch.
They even went on to say that the composers weren't ready for a project of this scale. Another reviewer was practically begging for another You're Welcome level hit.
I can practically hear the collective groan from Disney music fans everywhere. But hey, maybe there's some hidden gems in there. Did any of the reviewers mention any songs they actually liked?
There were a few. Beyond What Could Be Better Than This and Get Lost were all mentioned as being pretty catchy, so maybe it's not a total musical washout.
Okay, so maybe the music's a mixed bag. Just like the overall reception to the film.
Seems to be a theme emerging here.
And speaking of mixed, remember how we were talking about Moni's underdeveloped storyline? And how some reviewers felt like the movie was originally planned as a series?
Right.
Well, let's dive into that whole series versus movie debate a little deeper.
All right, let's unpack that a bit. This begs the question, did squeezing what was originally intended to be a multi-part series into a single movie ultimately hurt Moana 2? Did it rob it of its potential? Let's see what the reviewers have to say about that. Welcome back. Before we went to the, well, not a break, exactly.
Yeah, just keeping the ship sailing.
Right. We were talking about how some critics think Moana 2 might have worked better as a series.
It's kind of like when you try to fit all your vacation souvenirs into a tiny suitcase. You might get everything in there, but it's going to be messy, and some things might get broken along the way.
That's a perfect analogy. And one reviewer even said that's exactly what Moana 2 feels like, a bunch of good ideas crammed into a space too small to hold them. They actually used the word disjointed to describe the narrative, like scenes were awkwardly stitched together.
So instead of a smooth, flowing journey, it's more like a bumpy boat ride with sudden stops and starts.
Exactly. And remember that goddess character, Matangi, the one with the amazing song but hardly any screen time.
Yeah, I was curious about her.
One critic pointed to her as a prime example of this rushed transition from series to movie. It's like her story got chopped down to fit the time limit, and we only get a glimpse of her true potential.
Man, that's frustrating. It's like ordering a delicious-sounding dessert and only getting a tiny bite.
I know, right?
What kind of impact could she have had in a series format?
Well, imagine a whole episode dedicated to her backstory, her motivations, her relationship with Moana. Maybe we'd get to see how her powers connect to the island's history, or how she mentors Moana in a unique way.
Okay, now I'm really feeling that series FOMO. It's like there's a whole hidden layer of Moana 2 that we're only getting hints of. Speaking of hidden layers, what about Nello, the storm god villain? Do the reviewers think he would fare better in a series format too?
There's definitely a feeling that he was shortchanged. One review pointed out that we never actually see his powers in action. It's all just people talking about how scary he is, but there's no visual payoff.
So, like, he's all bark and no bite. Kind of hard to feel threatened by a villain you never actually see do anything villainous.
Right. And remember how Maui was this larger-than-life presence in the first film? He literally shaped the islands, stole the heart of Te Fiti, big, bold actions. With Nello, it's all just hearsay and ominous pronouncements.
It's the difference between hearing a scary story and actually experiencing something frightening yourself. One is a thrill, the other is just information.
And that lack of direct experience with the villain makes Moana's struggle less impactful. It makes you wonder if the filmmakers were holding back on Nalo, maybe saving him for a more prominent role in a potential Moana 3.
Ooh, that's interesting. So maybe they sacrificed his presence in this film to set up a bigger showdown later. But is that a fair trade-off? I mean, this film should be captivating on its own, right?
That's the debate. Some reviewers see it as a clever setup for a trilogy, while others feel like it's just a weak excuse for a lackluster villain in this film.
Okay, I'm putting Nalo's redemption arc on my Moana 3 wish list. But even if he gets more screen time in the next one, it still doesn't fix the issue in this film. All right, before we get too swept away by the current of speculation, let's take a moment to come up for air and talk about the music. We touched on this earlier, but I'm curious to dive deeper into the reviewers' reactions to the new songs.
It's safe to say that Lin-Manuel Miranda set a high bar with the original Moana soundtrack. I mean, how far ago? You're Welcome Those are instant classics. It's hard to imagine Moana 2 without hearing those melodies in your head.
Totally. It's like trying to picture Simba without the circle of life playing in the background. Those songs are woven into the fabric of the film. So how did the new songs measure up? Did the reviewers think they captured that same magic?
Well, one review was brutally honest, calling the new songs dull and the lyrics lazy. They even went so far as to say that the new composers weren't quite ready for such a high-profile project.
Ouch. That's got to sting for anyone trying to follow in Lin-Manuel Miranda's footsteps.
It's a tough act to follow. But remember, we're talking about critics here, and they tend to have strong opinions. It's important to remember that not everyone is going to love every song.
That's true. What about the reviewers who did enjoy the music? Were there any standout tracks that people were humming after the credits rolled?
Yes, actually. Beyond What Could Be Better Than This and Get Lost were all mentioned as being pretty catchy. It seems like the music is a mixed bag, just like the film itself. Some reviewers found it lacking compared to the original, while others found some enjoyment in the new tunes.
You know, it reminds me of when Frozen 2 came out.
Yeah.
Everyone was expecting another Let It Go, but the new songs just didn't have the same impact for a lot of people. It's tough to replicate that lightning in a bottle magic.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that sequels often face the challenge of living up to the legacy of their predecessors.
So with all these mixed reviews and this ongoing debate about the series versus movie format, is there anything that the critics did agree on?
One thing shines through, even in the most critical reviews: the animation. Moana 2 is visually stunning.
Okay, that's something we can all get behind. The animation in the first Moana was breathtaking, so I can only imagine how they've upped the ante for the sequel. What specifically are the reviewers saying about the visuals?
One review said it was like being transported to a tropical paradise, and that the water animation in particular was incredibly realistic and immersive.
Ooh, that makes me want to book a flight to a tropical island right now. I can just imagine those vibrant colors, the sparkling ocean, and the way the light dances on the water.
It seems like the animators really outdid themselves this time. They really captured that sense of wonder and beauty that we associate with Moana's world.
It makes you wonder if the emphasis on the visuals was partly to compensate for the narrative shortcomings. Like, maybe they thought, hey, even if the story isn't perfect, at least people will be blown away by the animation.
It's possible, but let's not forget that animation is an art form in itself, and those visuals deserve to be appreciated.
Absolutely. It's like saying, well, the Mona Lisa might not have the most exciting plot, but that smile is pretty captivating. Sometimes the artistry speaks for itself.
Exactly. And speaking of captivating audiences, it seems like Moana 2, despite its flaws, has achieved one of its primary goals:
Intriguing me. Okay, you got me. What is it?
enthralling its target audience.
Um,
Several reviews mention children at screenings being completely captivated by the film.
Oh, that's sweet. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things are the most magical. Kids don't necessarily need a complex plot or a groundbreaking musical score. They just want to be entertained and transported to another world.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of animation, isn't it? It has the power to appeal to people of all ages, to spark our imaginations, and remind us of the joy of storytelling.
Speaking of storytelling, there's one detail from the reviews that stuck with me. Remember Moana's new little sister, Samia? She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but one reviewer called her feisty and lovable and said she basically stole the show whenever she was on screen.
It's amazing how a well-crafted supporting character can leave such a lasting impression.
It makes you wonder if her role was initially larger in the series format. Like maybe she had a whole subplot that got cut down when they condensed the story into a movie.
It's definitely something to ponder, and it highlights how even seemingly minor characters can enrich the overall tapestry of a story.
You know, when I think about the original Moana, it wasn't just about the adventure or the music or even Maui's charming antics. At its core, it was a story about finding yourself, embracing your heritage, and charting your own course.
And it seems like Moana 2, despite its flaws, attempts to build on those themes. We see Moana wrestling with even bigger responsibilities, learning to rely on her crew, and facing new challenges that test her leadership skills.
So it's not just a retread of the first film, it's showing us a new chapter in Moana's journey, one that's more about leadership, responsibility, and the complexities of growing up.
Exactly. And that's where things get really intriguing. Imagine how those themes could have resonated even more deeply in a series format, with more time to explore those nuances and character arcs.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the highs and lows of Moana 2, from its breathtaking animation to its less-than-stellar villain. We've debated the merits of this series versus movie format, And we've even speculated about what the future holds for Moana and her crew.
But ultimately, the most important question is, what does all of this mean for you, the viewer?
Right. We can analyze these reviews all day long, but at the end of the day, it's up to each individual to decide whether or not Moana 2 is worth their time and attention. So we've explored the animation, the music, the characters, and even the possibility of Moana 3. But there's one more thing I want to touch on, something that really struck me as I was reading through these reviews. It's the way Moana's Polynesian heritage is woven into this story. It's not just a backdrop, you know? It's part of her identity, her journey, her connection to the ocean.
Right, right. One reviewer even mentioned that Moana was a chance for a lot of viewers to experience a culture they might not have been familiar with before.
Exactly. It's a reminder of how powerful representation can be, how important it is to tell stories from diverse perspectives.
And Moana 2 continues that tradition. We see Moana interacting with different island communities, encountering new myths and legends, and ultimately learning more about her own place in the vast tapestry of Polynesian culture.
So it's more than just an adventure story.
It's about understanding and celebrating heritage, especially for younger viewers, That can be so powerful. It's like saying, hey, your culture, your stories, your heritage, they're all worthy of being celebrated.
On the big screen.
Exactly. And that message, it resonates far beyond the movie itself. It sparks conversations, opens minds, encourages people to learn more about cultures different from their own.
It's like planting a seed. Okay, so we've really sailed across the ocean of Moana 2 here. We've debated the good, the bad, the series versus movie, even hummed a few tunes along the way.
I think we've covered just about every island in this archipelago of a film. We've looked at the animation, the music, the characters, that storm god villain hiding in the mid-credit scene.
We even speculated about what adventures might await in a Moana 3. But now it's time to drop anchor and answer the big question, the one that really matters.
The one that only you, dear listener, can answer for yourself.
Exactly. After diving deep into these reviews, after hearing all the different perspectives, after all our pondering and debating, is Moana 2 a voyage you're ready to embark on?
Will you set sail for the theater, eager to experience those stunning visuals and see how Moana's story continues?
Or will you stay ashore, content with the memories of the original?
Maybe a little wary of the choppy waters of this sequel. The choice is yours. But no matter what you decide, we hope this deep dive has given you a richer understanding of Moana 2 and all the currents swirling around it.
Because even if you skip this particular adventure, there's always something to be gained from exploring different perspectives, engaging in thoughtful discussions, and keeping that spirit of curiosity alive.
And who knows? Maybe this deep dive has sparked a new interest in Polynesian culture. Or maybe it's inspired you to revisit the original Moana. Or perhaps you've even started plotting out your own epic sequel in your head.
Whatever the takeaway, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those stories that resonate with you, because that's what the deep dive is all about.
Until next time, may your own journeys be filled with wonder and discovery.
Happy sailing.